My father likes rooms where people are watching. Admiral Keller's welcome home party was exactly that kind of room. The terrace overlooked the marina. Flags lined the railing, their edges snapping softly in the evening wind. White linen covered the long tables. Champagne rested in silver buckets, necks tilted in ice like something preserved for display. A string quartet played near the far wall, careful and restrained. The guests moved in practiced patterns. Officers in dress uniforms, civilian donors, spouses who understood posture and volume. Laughter rose and fell in controlled waves. I stood beside my brother Ethan. He had one hand around a glass and the other lightly on my shoulder, guiding me toward a cluster of guests. It was not forceful. It never is. He positions people the way he positions sentences. "This is my sister," he said easily. "Lena. She works admin on base." He always uses my middle name in rooms like this. It sounds softer, less defined. My father joined us a moment later, smiling broadly. His suit fit him well. He had chosen it carefully. "Our Lena keeps the paperwork straight," he added with a small smirk. "Somebody has to do the boring stuff." Polite laughter followed, the kind that lands quickly and disappears just as fast. I smiled. I have learned how to hold a smile without letting it touch anything important. Ethan continued speaking. He talked about defense contracts, about advisory boards, about how important civilian-military partnerships were for the future. He is fluent in relevance. People lean in when he talks. I stood half a step behind him, close enough to belong, far enough to be peripheral. It has always been this way. When we were children, Ethan answered questions first. At school events, my father would rest a hand on his shoulder and say, "That's my son," before anyone asked. Teachers nodded approvingly. Coaches remembered his name. I was introduced as the calm one, the easy one, the reliable one. "She doesn't cause trouble," my father would say. "Low maintenance." Low maintenance is a compliment when you are describing machinery. In the Air Force, usefulness matters. At the party, a server passed with a tray of champagne. I took one and held it without drinking. The glass was cool against my fingers. "So you're still in administrative support?" A woman beside Ethan asked me kindly. "Yes," I said. "Very important," she added quickly, as if correcting herself. My father chuckled. "Vital. We'd collapse without her spreadsheets." Another ripple of laughter. I nodded once. Across the terrace, I noticed a group of officers standing slightly apart from the civilians. Their posture was different. Still, even at rest, conversation minimal, observation constant. One of them shifted, and the fabric of his sleeve caught the light. A V-19 insignia. My gaze settled there for 1 second longer than it should have. 3 seconds. That was all it took. Twilight protocol, gray haze, dark rooms with screens glowing in controlled blue light, coordinates feeding in steady lines, the low hum of encrypted channels, a voice in my headset at 2:17, calm despite the static. Phantom actual. My pulse did not change. Ethan was describing a policy summit now. My father nodded at the right intervals. The quartet transitioned into something softer. "Brooks?" The voice came from just behind my left shoulder, quiet, controlled. I turned. The officer with the V-19 insignia was looking at me directly. Late 40s, composed, eyes that assessed before they spoke. "Yes, sir." He studied my face for a moment, then glanced at my name tag. "Captain Grayson's daughter," he said evenly. "That's you." It was not a question. "Yes, sir." A slight pause. "Twilight held," he added, so low that no one else would register the words as anything significant. "It did," I answered. No more than that. His expression did not change, but something in the air between us did. Recognition without display. Confirmation without exposure. He gave a small nod. Deliberate. My father noticed the shift and stepped closer. "Everything all right?" he asked, smiling broadly. "Perfectly," I said. The officer turned slightly toward him. "Your daughter's work has had impact," he said calmly. My father laughed, assuming a harmless exaggeration. "Oh, I'm sure she keeps things very tidy," he replied. The officer's gaze did not leave my father's face. "Yes," he said, "tidy." He held the word differently. For a fraction of a second, silence stretched, thin but noticeable. Then he stepped back into his group. Another officer glanced toward me. A subtle nod passed between them. Not casual, not decorative. Respect has a different texture than politeness. Ethan resumed speaking, filling the space smoothly. My father shifted topics to campaign donations and infrastructure. I remained where I was. A man from the logistics command approached and greeted the V-19 officer with quiet familiarity. As they spoke, his eyes flicked briefly toward me. Recognition again, not curiosity, knowledge. My father leaned toward me slightly. "You see," he murmured, "networking matters." "Yes," I said. He mistook my agreement for validation. A few minutes later, Admiral Keller himself crossed the terrace. Conversation softened automatically as he approached. He greeted Ethan first. They spoke about advisory councils and public messaging. Then his gaze moved to me. "Brooks," he said without looking at my name tag. "Yes, sir." A pause. "Good to see you outside the building," he added. "It's an honor, sir." He held my eyes for half a second longer than necessary. "Carry on." He moved away. My father's smile faded slightly. "You've met him before?" he asked. "Yes." "In admin?" "Yes." The answer was true. He studied me for a moment, recalibrating. Across the terrace, the V-19 officer raised his glass slightly in my direction, not high enough for anyone else to notice, not low enough to be accidental. I returned the gesture. The air felt different now, not loud, not dramatic, shifted. The laughter around us became more measured. A few guests looked at me with a curiosity that was no longer indulgent. My father attempted another joke about filing systems. It landed unevenly. No one contradicted him. No one agreed either. Ethan glanced at me once, quickly, as if reassessing the outline he had been using for years. I remained composed. I did not correct anyone. I did not expand. I did not explain what twilight required, or what gray haze demanded at 2:17 when a delayed transmission can cost lives. Those who knew, knew. Those who didn't, did not need the details. My father cleared his throat and straightened his jacket. For the first time that evening, he looked slightly uncertain. It was small, barely visible, but I saw it. The quartet began a slower piece. The sky darkened over the water. I set my untouched champagne on a passing tray and stepped back half a pace, allowing the conversation to continue without me. Control is not volume. It is timing. Have you ever stood in a room where people believed they understood you completely, only to realize they had been working with a fraction of the truth? If you'd like, we can continue. The shift did not happen loudly. It never does. After Admiral Keller moved on, the terrace reorganized itself in small, almost invisible ways. Conversations resumed, but they were measured now, controlled. I could feel glances reaching me and retreating. My father attempted another story, something about Ethan's recent panel in Washington. His voice was steady, but it carried an extra note. Too bright. No one interrupted him. No one leaned in the way they had earlier. Across the terrace, the V-19 officer spoke quietly with two others. One of them looked at me again, not with curiosity but calculation, not assessing whether I mattered but confirming how. Ethan shifted closer to me. "You know Keller personally?" he asked under his breath. "Yes." "From admin?" "Yes." He studied my face, searching for something I would not offer. The quartet changed tempo. The wind off the water picked up, moving the flags in sharper lines. A server approached with fresh glasses. I declined. My father turned back to me. "Since when do you get private nods from admirals?" he asked lightly, but the question had weight. "Work overlaps," I said. "With what?" he pressed. "Operational support." He laughed once, too quickly. That sounds dramatic. It isn't, I replied. He watched me for a moment longer than necessary. I could see the calculation begin. A small adjustment in posture. His shoulders squared, but his chin lowered slightly. Control, seeking new footing. A man from logistics approached me directly. "Captain," he said quietly. My father's smile paused. "Yes," I answered. "Good to see you," the man continued. "We closed the loop on gray haze. Clean resolution." "I'm aware," I said. He nodded once. "Credit where it's due." He moved on before my father could respond. The word hung there. Captain. My father turned slowly toward me. "I thought you were a lieutenant," he said. "I was," I answered. "When?" "Last year." He blinked. "You didn't mention that." "No." Ethan exhaled softly. "You've been promoted," he said carefully. "Yes." "And Twilight?" my father asked, the name unfamiliar in his mouth. "A program," I replied. "For what?" "Stability." The answer was technically accurate. He studied me as if trying to decide whether I was exaggerating. Across the terrace, Admiral Keller raised his glass in brief acknowledgement toward our direction. It was not public. It was not theatrical. It was deliberate. My father noticed. The smirk he had worn earlier did not return. "Why didn't you say anything?" he asked. "About what?" "About this." I considered the question. "You didn't ask," I said. The silence between us thickened. Ethan stepped in, filling it as he always had. "Well," he said lightly, "that's impressive. We should update the bio next time." Bio. The word reduced it again. Packaged. Simplified. I let it pass. An older colonel approached then, silver hair cropped short, posture unbent despite his age. "Brooks," he said quietly. "Yes, sir." He glanced briefly at my father and Ethan, then back at me. "Your recommendation carried weight," he said. "Lives were spared because of it." "Team effort," I replied. He gave the smallest shake of his head. "Not entirely." He moved away. No applause followed, no announcement, just a subtle rearrangement of perception. My father cleared his throat. "What recommendation?" he asked. "A timing adjustment," I said. "For what?" "For when not to move." He stared at me. The marina lights flickered on as the sky deepened. Reflections trembled across the water. Conversations continued around us, but the tone had changed. No one was laughing at filing jokes anymore. My father attempted one last time. "Well," he said, forcing a smile, "somebody has to keep the papers straight." A nearby officer glanced at him, then at me, then back at his drink. No one responded. The absence of laughter was louder than the laughter had been. Ethan shifted his weight. "You could have told us," he said quietly. "Why?" I asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it. My father looked out over the water instead of at me. "I was proud either way," he said. The sentence sounded rehearsed, incomplete. I did not challenge it. Across the terrace, the V-19 officer approached once more. He stopped at a respectful distance. "Captain," he said. "Yes, sir." "Briefing at 0700 Monday. Your presence is requested." "I'll be there." He nodded and left. My father stared at my uniform as if seeing it for the first time. "You're going back tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Busy," he murmured. "Yes." There was nothing more to add. The quartet concluded their set. Applause rose, controlled and polite. The evening began to thin as guests prepared to leave. Admiral Keller made his final rounds. When he reached us, he addressed my father first. "You must be proud," he said evenly. My father straightened. "Of course." Keller's gaze shifted to me. "She carries weight well," he said. Then he moved on. My father remained still for several seconds. "I didn't know," he said finally. "I know," I replied. We stood in silence as the terrace emptied. He did not apologize. He did not joke again. He simply adjusted his jacket and looked smaller than he had at the beginning of the evening. Not defeated, just recalibrated. I did not offer reassurance. Respect does not require commentary. It requires recognition. That night, as we walked toward the parking lot, no one introduced me as Lena from admin, and no one needed clarification. Tell me, have you ever allowed someone to believe you were smaller than you are, simply because it served a purpose? If you'd like, we'll continue. The parking lot was quieter than the terrace. Gravel shifted under polished shoes. Engines started in controlled intervals. Headlights cut pale tunnels through the dark. My father walked a few steps ahead of Ethan and me, hands behind his back. His posture was straight, but not as expansive as earlier. The marina lights reflected faintly on the hood of his car. Ethan unlocked his vehicle first. That was unexpected, he said carefully. Yes, I answered. He leaned against the door instead of getting in. You could have warned us. About what? About how people see you. I considered that. People see what they're trained to see, I said. He watched me for a moment. You let us think you were doing paperwork. I do paperwork. He exhaled softly, almost amused, almost frustrated. That's not the whole story. It doesn't have to be. He shook his head once. You know Dad didn't mean anything by it. I know. He searched my face for anger and did not find it. That makes it worse somehow, he said quietly. I did not respond. My father unlocked his car and paused before opening the door. Madison. He had not used my first name all evening. I stepped closer. Yes? He adjusted his cuff as if it required correction. You should have said something sooner. About my job? Yes. Why? So we wouldn't look foolish. There it was. Not cruelty, not apology, reputation. I wasn't responsible for that, I said. He held my gaze. You're part of this family. Yes. And what you do reflects on us. I'm aware. Silence settled between us. Not hostile, just exposed. For the record, he added, voice lower now, I am proud of you. I nodded once. Thank you. He waited as if expecting something else, some softening, some reassurance. I gave him none. He opened the car door and got in. Ethan watched the exchange without speaking. You've changed, he said quietly. No, I replied. I haven't. He considered that longer than he expected to. You're still the calm one, he said. Yes, but not invisible. No. He nodded slowly. Good night, Maddie. Good night. They drove away in separate directions. I remained in the parking lot for a few seconds after their taillights disappeared. The marina wind carried salt and fuel and something metallic. My phone vibrated. A message from the V-19 officer. Twilight files updated. You were correct about the delay. I typed back. Understood. No elaboration. I drove home alone. The house was quiet when I entered. My uniform jacket came off first. I hung it carefully, smoothing the shoulders out of habit. The insignia caught the light for a brief second before the closet door closed. I stood in the kitchen without turning on the overhead light. The street lamp outside cast a faint glow across the counter. My father's voice replayed in fragments. Lena from admin. Somebody has to do the boring stuff. You should have said something. I poured a glass of water and drank it slowly. The truth is simple. I never corrected them because it was efficient not to. In rooms where volume wins, silence gathers information. In families where hierarchy is assumed, restraint preserves leverage. If I had announced my clearance years ago, it would have become a story for my father to retell, a badge he could polish in public. If I had detailed my operations, Ethan would have folded them into his narratives about national security reform. I preferred to keep the edges clean. My phone vibrated again. A forwarded email from headquarters. Recommendation approved. Phase transition initiated. I read it once, closed it. The weight of that decision had never been visible at family dinners. It had not required applause. It had required precision. At 2:17, weeks earlier, when a convoy stalled in contested airspace, I had adjusted the timeline by 90 seconds. 90 seconds. Enough to avoid escalation. Enough to avoid a report that would have required folded flags. No one at the party needed those details. Those who mattered already had them. The next morning, I ran before sunrise. Cold air steadied the lungs. Asphalt underfoot. Rhythm. Control is physical before it is verbal. When I returned, there was a missed call from my father. No voicemail. I showered, dressed, and drove to base. At the gate, the guard checked my ID and nodded. "Morning, Captain." "Morning." Inside the operations building, the air felt different from the terrace the night before. Less decorative, more precise. In the briefing room at 0700, the V-19 officer stood at the head of the table. He did not acknowledge the party. He did not need to. "Twilight adjustments were accurate," he said to the room. "Brooks identified the lag before escalation." A few heads turned toward me. No applause, just notation. "Proceeding to Phase 2, he continued. I took my seat. The screens lit up. Coordinates, timelines, variables. Here, no one introduced me as admin. Here, silence was not invisibility. It was authority. At 08:15, during a pause in the briefing, the V-19 officer spoke quietly. "Your father seemed surprised." "Yes." "He'll adjust." "Yes." He gave a small nod. "You handled it correctly." "I know." There was no praise beyond that. None was needed. Later that afternoon, as I reviewed the updated sequence for Phase 2, my phone buzzed again. A message from my father. "Lunch this week?" I read it once, then again. No commentary, no qualifiers, just a request. I placed the phone face down and finished reviewing the file before answering. Thursday, 1300. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. That works. I did not smile. I did not brace. I simply returned to the screen. Perception had shifted, not because I demanded it, because it encountered facts. Tell me, have you ever allowed someone to speak over you for years, only to realize that the quiet correction, delivered once, carries more weight than 100 arguments? If you'd like, we can continue. Thursday arrived without ceremony. The restaurant my father chose overlooked the harbor, but from a lower angle than Admiral Keller's terrace. Less display, more business. I arrived 5 minutes early. He was already seated. My father does not like to appear as though he is waiting. He stood when I approached. A small gesture. Formal. "Madison," he said. I nodded once. "Dad." We sat. The menu remained closed between us. He adjusted his napkin, then his cuff. Small corrections before larger ones. "I've been thinking about the other night," he began. "I assumed you would." His jaw tightened briefly. "I misrepresented you." It was not an apology. It was a statement. "Yes," I said. "I didn't realize the scope of what you handle." "You didn't ask." The same answer as before. He exhaled slowly. "You could have volunteered it." "I chose not to." "Why?" The question came sharper this time. I folded my hands on the table. "Because my work isn't a story." He looked at me, studying, searching for accusation. There was none. "It reflects on the family," he said again. "It reflects on me." The waiter approached. Water was poured. We ordered without discussing it. When the waiter left, my father leaned forward slightly. "Do you know how that looked?" he asked quietly. "Yes." And it corrected itself. His mouth pressed into a thin line. "You embarrassed me." "I didn't contradict you." "You didn't need to." The truth settled between us like weight placed carefully on a scale. He looked out the window toward the harbor. "When I introduce you," he said slowly, "I simplify. It's easier." "For who?" "For people who don't understand complexity." "I understand complexity," I replied. He turned back to me. "That's not what I meant." "I know." The waiter delivered our meals, plates placed with quiet precision. My father waited until the waiter stepped away again. "You were always the calm one," he said. "Yes." "You never demanded attention." "No." "So I assumed you didn't need it." "I didn't." He studied my face. "Then what do you need?" The question was not rhetorical. I considered it. "Accuracy," I said. He frowned slightly. "In what sense?" "In the sense that when you speak about me, it should be true." "I never lied." "You reduced." He absorbed that. "People don't want operational details at a cocktail party." "I didn't expect you to provide them." "Then what would you have preferred?" "Nothing." He paused. "Nothing?" "Yes." "Introduce me by name." "Leave it there." He sat back slowly. "That's it?" "Yes." Silence stretched across the table. He took a measured sip of water. "You think I do it intentionally," he said. "Yes." His eyes narrowed. "Why would I diminish my own daughter intentionally?" "Control," I answered. The word landed without raised volume. He did not react immediately. "You believe that?" "Yes." "Explain." "I won't." His expression shifted. Frustration flickered, then something more restrained. "You've always been like this," he said quietly. "You hold things back. I hold what matters. And the rest?" His noise. He looked down at his plate but did not eat. "At the party," he said after a moment, "when that officer corrected me—" "He didn't correct you." He implied. He clarified. My father's jaw tightened again. "I don't like being clarified in public." "I know. That's not respect. Neither is reduction." The words settled without echo. He picked up his fork, then set it down again. "I built this family's reputation carefully," he said. "Years of work. And I built mine." He looked at me sharply. "You think I haven't contributed to yours? You contributed structure. And an expectation. And that's wrong?" "No." He waited. "But it doesn't entitle you to narrate what you don't understand." The restaurant noise remained low around us. Glasses clinked softly. Conversations remained contained. My father leaned back fully now. "I didn't know you were a captain." "I know." "Why didn't you tell us?" "You never asked about rank." He opened his mouth, then closed it. "Ethan said the same thing," he murmured. I did not comment. "Is that how you see us?" he asked finally. "As people who never ask?" "Yes." The honesty did not feel sharp. It felt accurate. He absorbed it slowly. "I thought giving you space was respect," he said. "It was distance. And you preferred that?" "At times." He nodded once, almost to himself. "I may have underestimated you," he admitted. "Yes." "Not intentionally." "It doesn't require intention." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "You're very precise." "Yes." "That's what unsettled me," he said quietly. "The certainty in that room. It wasn't loud. It was established." I held his gaze. "That's earned." He looked down at his hands. "I've spent decades earning authority," he said, "in business, in this town. And you have it. And yet, in one evening, I realized there are rooms where you carry weight I don't." "Yes." He did not argue. "That's difficult," he said. "I'm aware." Silence again. Then, after a long pause, he nodded. "I won't introduce you that way again." "Thank you." "That's all?" "Yes." He studied me, perhaps expecting resentment or relief. I offered neither. We ate in measured quiet after that. When the bill arrived, he reached for it automatically. "I can cover mine," I said. "I know." He paid anyway. Outside, the afternoon light had softened. He stopped beside his car. "You're briefing again Monday?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Good." A pause. "I may not understand everything you do," he said carefully, "but I understand responsibility." "I know." He hesitated, then extended his hand. Not for a hug, for acknowledgement. I took it, firm, brief. Then we stepped back. As I walked toward my car, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only adjustment. He would recalibrate his language, I would continue my work, distance restored, boundaries clear. Tell me, have you ever asked for less than an apology and received exactly what you required? If this quiet shift resonates with you, stay. There's more to uncover.